time in Latin America, Cuba. I negotiated the release of the only known political prisoners of war at the time in Cuba. Set up the first agricultural exchange between the University of Vienna and the University of Minnesota. As a step toward normalization, I'm reminded that at the time that was obviously some, close to 40 years ago in my youth. I was pretty sure we'd have normalization of relations within a few months. And I remember Castro saying, no, it's going to take 30, 40 years. It took us that long to get in this mess, it'll take us that long to get out of it. And I remember thinking what a cynic he was. Proved out he understood it better than I do. I was in the National Archives here the other day, and there was a letter from Fidel Castro as a 10-year-old to President Roosevelt asking if he could have a $10 bill. And he expressed admiration for the United States. And I can't help but think of, the many opportunities that have been lost. I'm reminded myself, I'm not reminded by the media, of the fact that we overthrew the first democratically elected government of Iran back in the 50s, and put the Shah in place, and awful Samak that did such brutality to the people there. So it's, and we see all those things still happening today. I must tell you, I'm having traveled, I was a congressional delegate to the European Parliament years ago. And then, of course, in my export trading business, I traveled and worked all over the world. Nowadays, and I did so with wonderful enthusiasm, nowadays I'm looking for excuses not to have to travel anywhere. But I don't mind telling you, Mary and I were on the road yesterday. We put on 750 miles on our car. We started out at a Rotary meeting in Duluth and then drove down to the Twin Cities for a grandson's basketball game in the state tournament, and then turned around and drove back to Duluth and then drove back home. So some of those, I only had 8 hours in the car. But I'll take a serious look at going down there, and because I embrace what's in it.
Some information if you
Yeah.
want me to take a look at it.
Sure. Now, I got to tell you, I have found, this is real quick, having traveled that business all over the globe, I've been amazed sometimes how much goodwill there remains for Americans in places where you wouldn't expect it. I was one of the first people into Hanoi at the end of the Vietnam War. My God, you thought we'd fought on their side. They were so relieved, and they were so glad to have a normalized relations with the American public, and they could never, quite frankly, understand, why we were doing what we were doing there, and of course I had to tell them, you're not alone in that, and we're still trying to understand, what we did, because we don't have a wonderful trade relationship. They're different than we are. The world is different than we are, but that doesn't mean you can't have normalized trade relations with them. And in Havana, in Cuba, the same thing. Every Cuba, oh, we love you guys. You trade with the Chinese communists and the Russian communists. Why don't you trade with us? We're your neighbors. We're not bad people. We got the highest literacy rate of any developing country in the world. We got the highest life expectancy of any developing country in the world. We're not bad, evil people. We got some different ideas about how to go about some of these things, but we sure like to do business and trade with you. And then sometimes you go to where our so-called friends and allies are. It's like, holy mackerel. Anybody here ever been to Saudi Arabia before? I have. Guess what? We wouldn't have this meeting here today because men and women can't meet in the same room. That's right. Any of you women who came here in your own car, would not have been allowed to do that. They have men's beaches, and I almost got into trouble one day. I was in a hotel in Riyadh, and they break, at noon every day till about 5 in the afternoon. And so I thought I'd get out to the pool in the exercise room, and immediately surrounded by police, and what have I done? What have I done? It was Women's Day at the pool. You know, men don't go to the pool on Women's Day, right? I learned that lesson. So, you know, the different cultures are different, and but there's no reason why you can't have normalized relations with them. Why? Because in my judgment, the best diplomats for America are its people. Don't cheat any nation, any culture, any people of not being able to develop relationships with the American people, because we are a good people at heart. We are a good people in performance. We are a good people in our education, in our understanding of our responsibilities, and to allow the diplomats to keep us apart from one another so that we end up on a battlefield shooting and killing one another is just a tragic and senseless mistake. So I support the normalization of relations with Cuba. I support a treaty with the Iranians on non-nuclear proliferation, and I support normalized relations with Venezuela as well, for many of the reasons that you just cited. Yes?
Is there any chance, do you think, that the members of Congress will admit that there is such a thing as climate change and maybe start in some ways to deal with it?
You know, that's been one of my laments is that I think climate change is, you know, again, maybe the top of one of the most serious issues that we have to deal with at this time and place in the world community. And there seems to be very, very little acknowledgement of it on a political basis by the general public and or the members of the Congress of the United States. And the reason that is most often cited is the fact that we've had climate change throughout history. And indeed we have. And it's been quite dramatic. It's been quite remarkable. But that belies the fact that we are contributing enormously to it. And call me old-fashioned, but you know, I was always taught that you know, you have an obligation to Mother Earth and to your fellow human beings to do all that you can to make sure that your impact here on your community and your planet is positive. And so there are things that we can and need to do to combat climate change. And they're not rocket science, but it involves finding ways to discourage the use of fossil fuels, to discourage you know, putting more carbons into the atmosphere. And there are a lot of benefits to be gained from that, through the use of solar and wind and geothermal and who knows what all the other great discoveries that lie ahead for us, provided, you know, that we don't destroy Mother Earth before we get a chance. I'm convinced we'll never destroy Mother Earth. She's here with us forever. We may destroy our place on the planet, and that's what scares me. But let me wrap this up with this, and then I'll stick around after this. But I got to tell you, there is a lot of goodwill in the Congress of the United States on both sides of the aisle. I have not met anyone that I don't like, that I don't appreciate. That's been magnified in recent months by all my good friends of the Tea Party and the right wing and the left wing, and that came up and prayed with me and are putting Catherine's name on their prayer board at Temple Israel and Mohammed's Mosque and the prayer groups in the Congress, and there's a tremendous amount of goodwill, and they all want to see us come together and start working together. And so we have to find a way to make those desires a reality. And I believe I have proven time and time and again, when they have afforded us that opportunity, I've been able to bring people together. That's a pretty big and important things. So process is important. Process is, that's why we have a democracy instead of a dictatorship. And I meant to say this earlier, I'm glad I got a second opportunity. I was talking to one of these United States senators who's new to government and politics, and I was talking about how we used to have 8,000 committee meetings, everything came up to the committee, now we hardly ever have any, and everything is decided in speakers' laws. We don't go through subcommittee, full committee conference. He said to me, well, isn't it more efficient this way? Well, yeah. Yeah, the Nazis and the communists would love it, you know. Democracy's messy, it's difficult, it's a lot of hard work, you know, get over it. But it's the best system that humanity has ever devised. And so we need to re-embrace that, because process does matter. Process matters. And that's why we're a democratic society. And that's why we come together to try to bridge the interest between the labor and the worker, between the environment and you know, the business success, and between this nation and that nation, and this group and that group. And when we come together, we find, gee, there's a lot of goodwill, you know. Holy mackerel, you know, I like that Rebecca. She's a smart girl. I never got to know her before. And look what Bob's doing for Lyme disease. And Bob and Beth are writing those great letters. They're so enlightening and informed to the editor. You start developing, you get to know each other, you develop some respect for one another, and their ideas, and in the process you start coming together, and you get things done. And that's what I'm committed to. I think that's what all of you are committed to, lifelong learning and trying to figure out how we get to that better place, restore the American dream, and continue that striving to make us a more perfect union. Thank you all.